Hey guys, Jack Gleason with Startuptrading.com, and today's lesson I'm going to go over a setup I like to call times up. And the reason I call it times up is basically this is a extension long or an extension short setup that has a certain amount of time to hit its target. And if it doesn't hit its target within that certain amount of time, you begin looking for reversals. And reversals can be extremely powerful trends in the market. So let's go over really a way to pick a reversal or look for one to happen. And this example, this lesson does use extensions. So whether that's an extension long or an extension short, um, and I call it times up. So one of the things you'll notice about extensions is they complete quickly, right? When they're in trend because they're an aggressive move. So this is a great example from the Friday, the 24th of January 2020. We had a low to low, and you see how quickly we complete that profit target, that negative 23% profit target. I'm going to use a Fibonacci time ratio here. So the Fibonacci time ratio is this guy right here. So if you go down to the bottom right here, click this guy, draw it across your screen. I'm going to click edit properties. Do yourself a favor real quick, pause this video and change all your properties to everything I got right here. Do yourself a favor, change your properties right here, and then when you're done, click play. Okay, you're done with that by now, hopefully. One of the things that I've noticed this for a while, but I was always confused is how to really incorporate it into my trading strategy. And one of the things I've noticed that if you go from the anchor of the extension to the low or the pivot of the extension, that will typically complete that extension target by the same amount of time that was between the anchor and the pivot. So you can see the anchor here, the pivot here. The 200 line is just that number basically doubled. What do? We complete it to the on the dot, and then once again we have this same anchor, time ratio to that new bar, and once again we complete it. Let me actually draw this new extension to low here. We complete it right on the open. And then we have another same anchor new low, or I'm sorry, then we have an extension to extension, I believe. Yeah, then we went extension to extension. And this is where it gets a little weird, just because basically you have a weekend, right? So weekend there's no trading, so this isn't as effective when you're drawing it over the weekend. That's one thing I noticed. Using this extension of the weekend isn't as effective. And then we have, once that completes, we have the same anchor, new low, and this is really where I want to show you guys kind of the failure of this to play out. So we go back to the time ratio, we draw it from that low, the anchor, to the pivot, and this should complete by here. So if we trade the halfway back short here, this should realistically be completing by the next day if we're going to continue to go lower. But what do you notice happens? We actually break the extension. Okay, we pierce the 61.8. So not only do we not complete, but we break the 61.8. And then the next morning, we break out of our short and we set up in a 50% retracement long that totally just squeezes us higher. So by not completing, this is for extensions specifically. I haven't really come up with anything concrete for like traditionals. This is definitely for extensions because the reason it works better in extensions is because extensions are an extremely aggressive trend, and they in order to complete, they need to make new lows, and if they're not making lows, basically you just get a heavy reversal. So if we don't complete our extension in the time it takes to go from the anchor to the new low, and you start seeing signs of reversal, that very well could be a very powerful signal. And you could see, we end up rolling out of this halfway back, and we just went straight up from there. It's a pretty incredible move. So let me show you another example here in gold. Clear this drawing set. Gold had this halfway back long last week on Friday. Okay, and from there, we blew out of profit targets Sunday, right? We blew out of profit targets Sunday, and then we had an extension. Okay, then we had an extension, and this was pretty sloppy, but the time series from that high to high should have really completed um, by here. If it doesn't, you want to be wary. That's when you start saying, hey, we're really not completing this extension. Is there, a move down? And then what do we get? We get a break first thing in the morning. A break first thing in the morning. This first trade after the break here, guys, is typically a great entry. And you can see we trade into that 50% retracement. We rotate lower and we complete profit targets 1576 to 1567. So right there, that is almost 10 points. All right. And then I want to show you actually one on oil. Oil had a very aggressive extension short sequence. Thursday's low to the Sunday night low, right? We trade it. It had sellers at the 38, sellers at the 38, sellers at the 50, sellers at the 50, sellers at the 38. You see how many people were selling this? However, it took a really long time to complete. And you can see once we got, the same distance in length between the anchor and the pivot, and that pivot and the two is right here, this pivot to the 200% line. Well, once we don't complete by then, what do you start seeing happen? Then you actually start seeing a counter trend trade, halfway back longs. We traded it to target, broke the extension, we had a same anchor new high, and that ended up trading to target as well. And then we broke the third measured move the next day as we ran into the oil inventory report. But something really interesting I've noticed lately is this extension pattern. I think it's an incredible trade. I'm going to really look for this trade. I want you guys to understand what this trade is. It's an extension that doesn't complete within a certain time frame. Whether that's an extension short or extension long doesn't matter. I want you guys to point out this trade. If you're in the chat room, I want you to tell me, hey, Jack, is this a times out trade on the USD JPY? Here's my anchor. Here's the sequence. Send me a picture and tag me. We can all use our minds together and help each other out when we're all looking at the same thing. That's what I love about the Startup Trading chat room, because we're all under the same type of analysis. There isn't really 30 different types of analysis that goes on in other rooms. If you're part of the Startup Trading room, you're in the know, and the rest of the traders are not. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next lesson.